Hello, everyone. This is Karen Carnabucci from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I am a practitioner in psychodrama, a trainer in psychodrama, and a family and systemic constellations facilitator, and I do many other things as well. And I'm talking to Ali Mezey, who also does many things. And one of the things that she has been doing lately, which is very exciting, has been to put together a documentary series on constellations, particularly working directly with Stefan Hausner, who is one of the greats in terms of training. And I am just super delighted to finally get together with you and hear all about it. And let's start.
Great. I'm really happy to be here, Karen. You've been so persistent and wonderfully welcoming. I really appreciate it. This is actually the first public opportunity to really share about this work now that it's finally done. So I'm thrilled.
That's great. Well, thank you for letting me be the first.
Yeah.
I want to find out, first of all, before we talk about the video series, I want to talk about just a little bit about you, to have you introduce yourself to the viewers, because I know you've been involved in the healing arts for many, many years and have much to share.
Indeed. So I'm Allison, or Ali. I just want to clarify that, because as I've made my directorial debut and really getting my own work out there, I made a decision to go with my familiar name. So I'm comfortable with either name, but just so that, because people will see my name posted both ways. So I just wanted to clarify that. So yes, I started as a massage therapist 37 years ago, along my own healing journey, during which time I've studied so many different modalities, practiced many of them. And it wasn't until about 8 years ago that I discovered family constellation work, when I was in the midst of a horrible crash of another career in New York. And I went down to John of God's to recover for 6 months, and discovered the work there from an Austrian facilitator. And it completely changed my life, as I know so many of you. It just, as soon as I even heard about it, I knew this work was for me. And even then, I had an inkling of wanting to do something public with the work. So that when I finally met Stefan, I had been to Bern Reed, the wonderful ISKA intensive in Germany. And I'd been there, I think I've been 3 times, and I had the great pleasure of experiencing Stefan's work there. And I'd already hosted several practitioners in Los Angeles, where I am based. And so it took me 4 years to get the guy to come here, because he's so in demand all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And he finally came in 2016 in March. That's almost exactly 2 years ago. And somehow, for about a month before, I thought, I should just film this. It took me so long. I just thought, maybe I'll just hire some camera people and go ahead and film this. And that's what I ended up doing. And 2 years later, it's turned into a 5-film series, not just about Stefan's work, but also about constellation work in general. The main film, which is called Rethinking Illness, a Transgenerational Approach, even though it specializes, it focuses on Stefan's work and his particular approach, and working with illness. I really wanted to create a film that would be sort of the ambassador for constellation work, getting it more out into the public, amongst the lay people or people who just aren't familiar with the work yet. And I just realized in talking about that, I kind of bypassed talking about my own work. So we can loop back around to that, but I'll just mention that I specialize now in constellation work with addiction, and for people who are grappling with addiction, both sex and drug addiction, in 2 different clinics in Los Angeles. So I specifically work with that, and also body issues, particularly sexuality issues. So just to throw that in there too.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I said earlier that I want to hear more about that. Maybe another video will do. Yeah. For now, I am curious on why you chose Stefan Hausner. There are many, many fine trainers, and many trainers with their own specialties, and certainly many wonderful trainers at Bern Reed.
Yes.
And elsewhere. How did you decide, Stefan, he'll be the one that I want to bring to Los Angeles. He'll be the one that I want to record.
It's a great question, and I'm really glad you're asking that, because I have many beloved mentors and trainers and facilitators in constellation work, and who are not obviously the focus of this film, though I hope to make many more in the future. I decided on it for a variety of reasons, one of which is the most practical, which is that Stephan can command a large enough group of people to be able to partially pay for such a film. So Stephan and I both put money into the film, and because 60 people came, which, you know, there's a lot of fantastic facilitators, not all of them will attract 60 paying people who are flying in. So Stephan has a particular following that I knew could afford to at least begin the process of actually making a film. That's one really important reason, because I've simply hosted a lot of other people who would have loved to have filmed and shared their work. Another reason is that Stephan, I feel, for a variety of reasons, is a wonderful representative of the work that I felt would reach the mainstream perhaps more effectively than many others who are perhaps just as wonderful in their facilitation. I also thought it was important to have a German introduce the work, somebody who, in my understanding, Stephan was one of Bert's proteges. So I feel like he was both right under one of those first generations of students of Bert's, but at the same time really took on his own path that is distinct. And this is an odd way to say it, maybe I shouldn't, but also illness is sexy, you know? It's something people, everyone can relate to illness. Everybody has grappled with illness themselves, will grapple with illness themselves, or has a loved one, or works with people who are ill. So it's such a particular niche that I felt like it would draw people from the outside, because when people are struggling with illness, many people are desperate. You know, they are much more motivated to look into something they've maybe heard of or think is totally weird, but that may help them, that may give them that missing link, that I knew it would draw more attention. And that has really been from the beginning. My intention is, how can I offer something that will open people to a method that they wouldn't otherwise be open to? Not just for the sake of people who can benefit from the work, but I feel really passionate about getting this work out there for the sake of facilitators all over the world, most of whom I know are not earning a living, or I assume, that's what I hear anyway. Most people are not earning a living as a constellation facilitator yet. And I want people to be knocking on facilitators' doors. And I think one of the ways, and I'll mention this too, maybe this is premature and I should keep my mouth shut, but I'm also creating a directory because this film will draw a lot of attention to my website, the site for these films. And I want to create a directory whereby people can find practitioners all over the world, and practitioners can, you know, have a venue, what's the word, a platform to really reach more of the public, you know, at large. So it's a long answer. Does that, and besides the fact, I got to add, I mean, Stephan's wonderful. I mean, he's approachable, he's knowledgeable, he's charming, and I find him deeply engaging. So that's another reason.
Yes.
Add that one too.
Well, you know, the genesis of my question is we usually think of constellations and usually present constellations especially when we're talking to newcomers, we talk about relationships, we talk about depression, anxiety, what are typically mental health problems, addictions. Mm-hmm. And I think that we don't nearly talk enough about illness, people being sick. And so that especially interests me that you have chosen to focus on illness. And you are so right. Yes, people are desperate when they are ill. And
also, I'm going to add, just from my own personal background and dedicating decades to working with bodies, not specifically illness, but body issues, body restrictions and pains and injury and trauma, is that I have a particular passion for giving voice to the body and really giving language to the body so that it can speak its brilliance. So that's another reason why I'm particularly interested, obviously, in constellation work in general, but in focusing more on illness itself. Yeah.
I'm interested in the workshop itself. And by the way, I think that we should both agree to say that Stephan is the author of a very wonderful book that many of us have read called
Even If
It Cost Me My Life,
yes.
which is highly recommended. And I also recommend it to my trainees as well. Yeah. So I am curious, keeping confidentiality, of course, I'm curious how you might describe what we might see on film in terms of what happened at this workshop that we will see.
Sure. So the workshop, I think, was 4.5 days in a beautiful venue, which you can see even on the preview 9-minute. It's called a trailer, but it's like a trailer on steroids. It's a really long trailer. But you can see it's a beautiful venue in Topanga Canyon, California. And there was, I think, 3 days of constellations first, where Stephan really does a beautiful job of lecturing in between doing constellations. And at times he'll even stop in the midst of a constellation and do some teaching. We did 4 days of constellation, but the first 3 days we did not film because we also wanted to keep the integrity and the intimacy of a workshop. So how we worked it is we did interviews. I pulled people out or invited people to be interviewed on the Saturday and Sunday in a separate room while personal constellations were going on. And then on the last day, it was a half day in the morning. I think Stephan lectured for a good hour and a half, and it was this fantastic lecture, much of which is interspersed in these films. And then we invited people to stay for free, basically, for the rest of the day, as long as they were willing to be on camera. So during that time, we shot 3 constellations, and just so people know, I created a series of 5 films. They're almost all 90 minutes long. 2 are and 3 are almost. 3 of them are full-length constellations with 4 cameras, ton of editing, which has taken months and months and months, and then follow-up interviews with the clients, 2 of them 2 months later and 1 of them a whole year later. So we get to really hear from them and see them after that constellation has processed through them. And then the first film, the main film that I wanted to create, as I mentioned, for the public at large, as well as constellation aficionados and ill people and everybody, is about just explaining constellation work in general, explaining some of Stephan's basic tenets, introducing these 3 people who later have full constellations, and talking specifically about working with illness as well. So that's the first film. And the second film is called The Art of Facilitating. So that uses all this footage I've described to really get in on some very particular things that Stephan talks about and teaches and deeply believes in. So it's a whole combination. does that answer your question, or did you want to know more about the workshop itself?
That's a very good start. It occurs to me that many people watching this video know all about constellations. They do them, they teach them, they love them, they've read about every single book there is to read. And it also occurs to me there's some people watching this video who are going, constellations? What's that? So I would love to hear how you describe constellations to a newcomer, and maybe that is part of the video as well. But how do you start getting people interested in checking out what is obviously, although it's been around now for 30 some years, is still very unconventional in our healing world?
So I'm going to preface that by saying for the last year particularly, when I'm describing the work, it's usually in a group with people dealing with addiction. So it's people who know absolutely nothing about the work, may not experience it again once they're out of their rehab process. So how I'm going to describe it now may not be how I would describe it if it were in a group of constellation people or almost constellation people. So I just want to say that because I've really come to simplify it. I hope not too much so. But how I talk about it is that it is a method by which we can see and experience the schemas by which we live. So I say in the film, it's about the geometry of relationship, because one of the main languages of the body is spatial relationship. The body knows everything. It's been with us in every second. It is comprised of, expresses all of our lineage, all of our genetics. And so it is this incredible storehouse, this treasure trove of all of what we are while we're alive anyway. So it houses everything. It just doesn't have verbal language. So constellation work comes along and allows us to actually see, feel, and experience and share with others what our body knows and what other bodies know about our hidden dynamics, about our loyalties, about the burdens we've been carrying or the blockages we've been feeling and grappling with, but haven't been able to really bring forward to our consciousness in a way that can really change. So one of my favorite quotes in the film is, actually, Stephan says this about Thomas Hubel, a teacher and colleague of his. It just takes, I think it's Sheila Saunders who says it, but someone needs to actually see it. You know, whatever is unconscious in our families, it just needs to get seen, if not felt, so that it can be honored and experienced deeply enough to be able to let go of that, of the service that it's been rendering. So constellation work for me is, again, a way to externalize what is internal, be able to make it conscious, be able to really feel it through the body so that it can move and no longer has to be stuck and secret and affecting our lives in ways that are giving us trouble.
I've had so many clients say to me, usually in group or usually in therapy, I feel broken and I don't have much to contribute.
Oh.
And when I stand and represent in the constellations, I realize I have something to offer and my body has something to offer.
Really touches me to hear that.
And that in itself is so healing, isn't it?
Really touches me.
Yeah.
Partially because, you know, I work with people who are considered broken.
Mm-hmm.
And my view of them is so different, and most of them are so deeply sensitive. So I get to see this every week of people realizing, oh, actually, I'm more connected than I thought, and I can, as you say, contribute more than I thought or felt, and I can use this sensitivity for good, you know?
Yes. It's an amazing awareness, and I have a gift. I'm not broken.
Yeah, exactly.
Or I've been hurt, but I still have a gift. Yes, yes. So
Which,
I
by
very
the
much,
way, if I may say, Karen, and
yes.
I wonder if you feel the same way and listeners feel the same way. That's a lot of why the work touches me so deeply and affected my life so completely, was that all of a sudden this empathic flesh that I have, struggled with a lot in my life became an exquisite instrument by which I could both heal and help heal others, so it really helped me fall in love with with being a body.
Yes, yes. I have a lot of experience with eating disorders and have co-written a book on eating disorders. And I hear that also, where rather than push and shove the body into some kind of shape or look, oh, my body just as it is has tremendous wisdom,
Yeah.
which
So,
is lovely for people to realize, and not just realize here, but of course, experience. I always believe the experience goes deeper. Good. So, can we talk a little bit about how an illness, and perhaps you'll refer to one of the stories told in the film that is able to be made public. Can you relate a little bit to how an illness might be connected to a family trauma of the past?
let me think about these particular stories. I'm going to stay general about them, but I'm going to talk a bit about just the function that the illnesses, again, have been, serving. In one, the illness was really had to do with, it was kind of holding a place for those who had been excluded. So as the excluded people were acknowledged, and the feelings by the client towards those excluded people was worked through, the symptoms were were neutralized, really, because that's what the representative experienced. And apparently the person that the constellation was for has markedly shifted since the constellation. So that's a huge one, is that somebody who's been excluded will often be represented by illness. So the illness is there as almost like a living memory, or a reminder that there's something that needs to be looked at, needs to be included, and needs to be, as Stephan talks a lot about, being able to expand enough to include. I've heard a lot about, in Constellations, we of course talk a lot about including. Mm-hmm. But until Stephan also bringing in the work of Thomas Hübl, I haven't heard people talking about the necessity to actually also expand in order to be able to include. Maybe that is common for people, I don't know, but I hadn't heard a lot about that prior to this work. So that's one example. Another one has a lot to do with illness can also be both a connector and a disconnector. That happens a lot, where someone was feeling like they needed to have some protection, both from their mother, but that wasn't just that. It was also helping to learn how to create a bridge, but coming on their own terms, back to receiving the nurturing that they needed. Really claiming a place. There's one film that's called My Place is My Place, and it's all about taking back place. And I would say in that one too, the illness has several different functions. I wouldn't say that it's just a single one, and not necessarily one that can be put into a little box, because the function can also morph. Of course, we're looking at a constellation and wanting to make sense of it, in ways, but it also has its own living, breathing.
It seems to me that conventional medical professionals really need to know about this work.
I hope so. I hope so. Dr. Bruce Naowith.
Yes.
Who's
Yes.
one of those, fabulous bridge people, who's got 1 foot in, or 2 feet in, being I'm sure an amazing doctor, and also has the expansiveness to have become a constellation person. He reviewed, saw the films, and has a review which is on my website. And exactly, it's people like that. It's the people who are open. And that said, there's going to be people who think it's a bunch of hogwash, But luckily, I made a I made a point to interview several doctors who were in the film. A couple of them had never experienced constellation work before, which is fantastic. And they came and had this experience, and they were amazed by it. So yes, in a perfect world, it wouldn't just get into the mainstream of, the patient population. It would also get into the medical practitioner population. Fingers crossed. I don't know. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. So what are your plans to get this documentary out? I know that I will be receiving my own personal copy.
Well,
and many others will as well. And you certainly talked about it and made it present at our conference back in October, the North American Systemic Constellations Conference.
Yeah.
What are your plans for getting this out to the people, physicians, other medical professionals, as well as the public, and certainly mental health professionals and other related health practitioners?
So my plans, after I recover from having created the films, is to ask for help. It's not something I've been historically good at, but it's something that I definitely need, both because I'm exhausted. I spent, I mean, there's thousands of hours while I've also had to earn a living, so I've been working 60 to 80 hour weeks for months to get this out there. And I need to turn to my own needs, my own life. And I also am starting other projects. I want to definitely keep making films. So that said, I'm inching my way into Facebook and social media. I definitely need to get some millennial help with, a social media campaign. I really am hoping to do as grassroots as possible. I'm going to start talking again with some distributors and see. I have mixed feelings about putting it out on a big public platform, though that's possible. I may do that as well. There's pros and cons to doing that, as you can imagine. So right now, though, because part of my raising funds was I chose to go the route of a pre-purchase campaign in order to do that. So thanks to all those people who pre-purchased, because it enabled me to finish the editing on these films. That also changed the trajectory of perhaps some of my options about how I can sell moving forward. So I'm really hoping people are going to blab about it and post about it, and enough medical people and enough ill people and enough facilitator people and enough just people are going to spread the word, because at the very least I'd like to make back all the money that went into this.
Excuse me.
That's quite all right. Better than the wood chipper that was going through the first half. So.
Somebody's interested right now.
Great, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so that was the phone. Calling, having interest in this lovely video series. So my next question, I think you've partially answered that already, was how can we in the constellation community be helpful? Because it occurs to me that in a way this is not only your video series, although it certainly is, and you have put enormous effort forward, and I saw you at the conference and we talked a bit about it, and I know that there was great effort. Yeah. But in a way it's also our video series as well. I'm so
glad you say that. I'm so glad you say that. I hope so. As I said from the very beginning, I'm wanting, I mean, it sounds so demeaning to say this about Stefan because I have a world of respect for him, but to answer your first question, I think he's like he's like the poster child, you know, I think he's a great, like I said, a great ambassador for this work. And hopefully the films will serve as such so that we can get this beautiful work we love so much out there so people can benefit from it as well they will. So yes, I guess the help would be to, you know, let people know about it. I'll very specifically, the website for the films is constellationarts.com. I just created a Facebook page. Like I said, I'm such a baby when it comes to, like, you know, Facebook and social media. So I'm just beginning to learn about, you know, doing that and sharing and all that kind of stuff out there.
I saw and I joined.
I know. So I just please like and share and love and pass it along and let people know, and hopefully people will buy the films. It's possible to buy all of them for a discount, or you can buy just one. I mean, the main film, Rethinking Illness, is really the film that I recommend to people. And I'm hoping that people will use this as to explain this stuff to people. You know, we all have family members. For example, a friend of mine asked me today, they said, well, have you showed your family? I was like, no, which is nuts. I mean, it's a great way to begin to explain some of this work to people who may have just kind of watched us on the side from the sidelines, you know, doing this and talking about it, but not necessarily really getting it because they would never actually go to a workshop. So spending an hour and a half in the comfort of their own home, you know, I think for a lot of people it will create openings, you know, if not going to finding constellations themselves, hopefully will at least open their understanding of what this amazing flesh is capable of and helping to connect us all. So
yes, and that's really one of the reasons that I wanted so much to talk to you, was to help share the word about this.
You. I'm so grateful, Karen. You just, you know, you're one of the people that's just been a support all along the way, and I'm really, truly grateful. And, you know, anybody who's listening, if anybody, including yourself, has any ideas or knows marketing people or, you know, film people, or you want to host, you know, viewings in your town or whatever, you know, I'm open to whatever.
That's great. I want to let you go soon, but I want to ask one important question that I think that many people are also thinking as they're watching us and hearing us talk, and that is, does this work? So the people who had the intensive constellation session, the people came with an illness, a condition, people that I'm sure have been to doctors and health professionals and hospitals and have been worked on in a conventional way. Did this method, what we love, family and systemic constellations, did this method give them relief? Did it help them? And was that help temporary, you know, the high of the workshop, when you go home, I feel great, versus when you checked with them later, many months later, how was their health?
So I love the question, and it's one that I have to say can weigh on me, not just in relation to the films, but in general about our work, because it is so ephemeral. You know, it's not tangible for the most part, though of course we've experienced those instances where, you know, somebody will suddenly call during a constellation, or things can seemingly miraculously happen because of a constellation. So even though there's been, you know, countless confirmations in whatever the topic is of a constellation of it having some very positive effect, of course I still wonder, you know, does this really work? And Dr. Eileen Kenny, who's also in the film, says at one point, and I love this, and I hope it doesn't just go by without people really taking this one in. She says that, I don't remember exactly the words, but she says, you know, it can either heal your illness, or you still have the physical symptoms, but you have yourself. And I think this is so, so important that for all three of the participants, all three people who got a constellation, you'll hear them talk about in both in retrospect and also in their current lives at the time of that second shoot, those second shoots. They felt a marked difference between the time. So I'm happy to report that yes, all three of them felt like they distinctly got healing benefit from those constellations. But I'll also say, you know, there was a man, and unfortunately we weren't able to shoot his constellation. He had stage 4 lung cancer, and we interview him in the film. And he did die, but he died a year later than he was expected to die. And as he says in the film, he came what he got. You know, he got what he came for. You know, he got a richer understanding. So he went home, and I have no doubt that he related to his illness differently afterwards. He probably related to his wife and his children and perhaps his parents differently afterwards. And ultimately, isn't that really what it's about? Whether our symptoms change or money falls out of the sky or, you know, we meet our soulmates tomorrow or whatever it is people are constellating about. Ultimately, it's about how are we able to experience more of our own wholeness. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I can say yes, in these instances, it helped people's health, thank goodness. And that seems to have gone beyond the workshop high. And Stefan's book, I have to say, is full of case studies, which I, you know, as you did, I so recommend that book. I mean, whether you're interested in illness or not, it really is a superb constellation book that's very easy to read. There are a lot of instances of people's illnesses disappearing. That said, as he talks about extensively in the film, ultimately, you know, it's not the constellation that does that. It's not the constellation that does the healing. The constellation has to happen within ourselves. And we're the ones that have to take that personal step to grow in the way that the constellation's just indicating. It's a guide to show us where that growth may lie, and then it's up to us whether or not we take those steps or not.
Thank you. That's a beautiful answer. And probably we could talk for a longer time.
Yes.
And I hope that we will talk again, actually. I do want to say that Ali's website is constellationarts.com. My website is realtruekaren.com. And I think both of us will be very happy to talk about constellations and the healing possibilities of them. And certainly I totally support your work and certainly want to shout out about the availability of this amazing video series.
Thank you so
So
much.
I thank you for the time, and I thank you for making it too. Really, it was and probably still is to some degree, a huge undertaking. And I really want to give you a little bow on that.
Thank you. I appreciate
So thank
that.
you so very much.
It gave me a tremendous amount, having always wanted to make films, and it really gave me the inspiration and the impetus and the fortitude ultimately to see it through. But I'm really, I truly wish it to be the gift that I intend it to be to constellators and future constellators.
Very nice. So we'll look forward to talking again. In the meanwhile, we want to send people to constellationarts.com.
Thank you so much, Karen.
You are very welcome.